I watched him snap his fingers at security, pointing at me like I was trash to be removed. He had no idea who I was, no idea what I'd sacrificed, no idea that in exactly 7 minutes his entire empire would crumble, and I'd be the only one who could save it. Let me take you back to where it all began. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was standing in the marble lobby of Castellano Pharmaceutical headquarters. The place looked like a palace, honestly. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they made you feel small. The floors were polished to a mirror shine, and security guards in tailored suits stood at every corner like sentinels. I felt out of place in my mother's simple navy dress, the one she wore to church every Sunday. It was the nicest thing I owned. In my hands, I clutched a worn leather folder that contained everything I'd spent the last year gathering: evidence, truth, justice. I was there for a 2 o'clock appointment. Well, sort of. I'd called every week for 6 months, and finally someone in scheduling had either made a mistake or taken pity on me. Either way, I had confirmation, and I wasn't leaving without being heard. That's when he walked in, Damien Castellano. If you don't know the name, imagine every billionaire you've ever seen on magazine covers, and you've got him. 45 years old, silver hair, perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. He swept through the lobby with an entourage of assistants, all of them practically jogging to keep up with his pace. I could hear one of them talking, listing off his achievements like a resume on fast forward. Youngest CEO in pharmaceutical history, net worth of $4.2 billion, revolutionary cancer treatment that saved thousands of lives. That last one made my stomach turn. I approached the reception desk, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The receptionist looked at me with that practiced smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Before I could speak, I heard his voice cut through the lobby like a knife. "I don't have appointments with random people wandering in off the street." I turned. Damien Castellano was staring at me with a look of such pure disgust that I actually took a step back. His entourage had stopped, and now everyone in that lobby was watching us. Watching me. "Mr. Castellano," I managed, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "I'm Lorraine Baptiste. We spoke last week about security." He didn't even let me finish, just snapped his fingers and pointed at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered into his palace. "Remove her. Now." 2 guards appeared at my sides so quickly it was like they'd materialized out of thin air. I could feel hands on my arms, firm but not rough. Not yet. "You don't understand," I said, louder now, desperate. "This is about the Aurora project. You need to hear what I have to say about Aurora." For half a second, maybe less, he froze. I saw something flicker across his face when I said that name. Recognition? Fear? But then it was gone, replaced by cold dismissal. "Another conspiracy theorist," he said to his assistant, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Get her out before I call the police." I tried to hold my ground, but the guards were already moving me toward the door. People in expensive suits and designer dresses stopped to stare. Some looked amused, others looked uncomfortable. But no one helped. No one questioned it. I was just some woman in a cheap dress causing a scene in a billionaire's lobby. The glass doors closed behind me, and suddenly I was standing on the sidewalk, still clutching my folder, fighting back tears that I refused to let fall. Not there. Not where anyone could see. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. All I could think about was my mother. 3 years ago, Dr. Claudette Baptiste was one of the most brilliant biochemists you'd never heard of. That was my mother. She worked in Castellano Pharmaceutical's research division for 15 years. 15 years of late nights, of missed birthdays, of holidays spent in the lab instead of with family. She was dedicated in a way that seems almost naive now. She believed in the work, believed that science could save lives. The Aurora project was her baby, a revolutionary cancer treatment that targeted tumor cells with unprecedented precision while leaving healthy cells untouched. She led the research team, spent 5 years developing the compound, ran thousands of trials. I remember her coming home at midnight, eyes red from staring at data, but smiling because they'd had a breakthrough. She'd hug me and say, "Lorraine, we're going to save lives. Real lives." And they did. The drug went to human trials and the results were miraculous. Tumors that had been death sentences started shrinking. Patients who'd been given months to live were going into remission. Castellano's stock price went from $89 to $340 per share practically overnight. My mother was promised recognition. She was promised her name on the patent, a share of the profits, acknowledgement of her role. She had contracts, or so she thought. Instead, Damian Castellano held a massive press conference. I watched it on TV with my mother. He stood in front of cameras from around the world and announced Aurora as his company's greatest achievement. He talked about his vision, his leadership, his commitment to saving lives. He never mentioned my mother's name, not once. The lawyers found a loophole, some clause buried in her employment contract that gave the company rights to all research conducted on company time with company resources. Technically legal, morally bankrupt. My mother tried to fight it, but what could she do? She was one woman against an army of corporate lawyers. She got a small bonus and a plaque that they never even hung up in the office, and then, as if the universe had decided it hadn't been cruel enough, my mother developed ovarian cancer. The same type of cancer that Aurora was designed to treat. The irony was so bitter I can still taste it. She needed the drug she'd invented, but Castellano Pharmaceuticals said it was still in limited production. There were protocols, waiting lists, insurance complications, red tape that somehow never seemed to get resolved. We waited. She got sicker. The cancer spread. 8 months later, I held my mother's hand in our small apartment as she took her last breath. She looked at me with eyes that had lost their light weeks earlier and whispered, "Make sure the world knows the truth, Lorraine. Promise me." I promised. For the past year, I'd been gathering evidence. My mother had kept everything. Research notes, emails, lab documentation, meeting minutes. She'd been meticulous, probably because some part of her knew this might happen. I found boxes of files in her closet, backup drives hidden in her desk. Every piece of evidence I needed to prove that Dr. Claudette Baptiste was the true architect of Aurora. I'd tried everything to reach Damian Castellano, emails that went unanswered, calls that got screened, letters that were probably thrown away unopened. Today was supposed to be different. Today I'd finally gotten through, and he'd had me thrown out like garbage. I was still standing on that sidewalk, staring at nothing, when my phone buzzed again. This time I looked at it. A news alert. The headline made my blood run cold. Breaking: Castellano Pharmaceuticals Aurora drug. Critical manufacturing defect discovered. My hands started shaking as I read. Batches from the last 6 months were contaminated. Instead of treating cancer, they were causing rapid liver failure. 847 patients affected. 12 already dead. The FDA was launching an emergency investigation. I knew immediately what had gone wrong. My mother's notes had predicted this exact scenario. She'd designed a specific quality control protocol for the synthesis process. There were 7 critical steps, and she'd written in capital letters in her notes. Step 7 is non-negotiable. Skip it, and the molecule becomes toxic. After she died, I'd heard through former colleagues that new management had taken over. They'd streamlined production to increase output and cut costs. I'd bet everything I owned that they'd eliminated Step 7. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it without thinking. "Ms. Baptiste?" The voice was female, breathless, panicked. "This is Greta Fisher, Chief Legal Officer at Castellano Pharmaceuticals. We need your help. We found your mother's name in the original research files. Mr. Castellano would like to speak with you, immediately." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I bet he would," I said. An hour later, I was back in that same lobby. This time, Damian Castellano himself came down to get me. The arrogance was gone. His face was pale, and his hands had a slight tremor that he was trying to hide. He could barely look at me as he spoke. "Ms. Baptiste, there's been a misunderstanding. Please come with me." He led me to a boardroom on the top floor. 15 people were crammed around a massive table. Lawyers, scientists, PR consultants, all of them looked like they'd aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. A news broadcast played on mute on the wall screen, showing the company's stock price in freefall, down 64% and still dropping. Damien gestured to a chair, but I remained standing. "We found your mother's protocols," he said without preamble. "Dr. Baptiste predicted this exact failure in her notes. You've been trying to reach me. I assume you know how to fix this?" He paused, and for a moment, he looked like he might be sick. "Name your price." I placed my mother's leather folder on the table with a soft thud that somehow echoed in the silent room. "Yes," I said quietly. "I know how to fix it." My mother documented the solution. But first, let's talk about what really happened to Dr. Claudette Baptiste, the woman whose work built this empire while she died, begging for access to her own invention. The silence was absolute. I opened the folder and began laying out documents, research notes in my mother's handwriting, emails time-stamped years before Aurora went public, lab reports with her signature. As I presented each piece of evidence, I watched the faces around the table. Most looked guilty, some looked shocked. But one man, sitting near the end of the table, looked terrified. Vincent Moreau, my mother's direct supervisor. I recognized him from old photos she'd kept. "Mr. Moreau," I said, looking directly at him. "You were there when my mother raised concerns about cutting corners in production, weren't you?" He didn't answer, but his face told me everything. I pulled out a specific email and slid it across the table to Damien. "In fact, you're the one who approved bypassing Step 7 of the synthesis protocol. You prioritized quarterly profits over safety, over lives." Vincent's face had gone from pale to gray. That's not... You don't understand the pressure we were under." 12 people are dead," I cut him off. 800 more are in hospitals right now. Did you understand that pressure, Mr. Moreau?" Damien had gone completely still, reading the email. When he looked up at Vincent, there was something dangerous in his eyes. "Vincent," his voice was deadly quiet. "You told me the research team approved the modifications. You said Dr. Baptiste's protocols were unnecessarily cautious." Vincent was stammering now. "We needed to increase production. The demand was insane. I thought we could get away with it. The molecule seemed stable in initial tests." "You thought?" Damien's composure cracked. "You thought? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "You trusted him," I said, and Damien's attention snapped back to me. "Vincent told you what you wanted to hear, and you didn't verify the science yourself. When my mother died, did you even ask how? Did you know she developed the same cancer Aurora was supposed to treat? That she couldn't get access to her own invention because of protocols and waiting lists?" Damien's face had gone white. I didn't know. Vincent told me her death was unrelated to the company. He said she'd already left the research team before." He stopped, looking at Vincent with dawning horror. "You lied to me. About everything." "I'm not here to absolve you," I said to Damien. "Not knowing doesn't erase what happened. You erased my mother's legacy. You treated me like trash in your lobby this morning. But I'm also not a monster, and unlike you, I actually understand what my mother created and why it matters." I took a breath, feeling every eye in the room on me. "Here's what's going to happen. I'll provide the fix from my mother's notes. It will take 72 hours to implement, and it will work. In exchange, there will be a press conference within 48 hours, acknowledging Dr. Claudette Baptiste as Aurora's creator and lead architect. Her name will be added to the patent. You will establish the Dr. Claudette Baptiste Research Fellowship with a $50 million endowment for promising scientists from underrepresented communities." I looked at Vincent. "Mr. Moreau will be terminated immediately and will cooperate fully with federal investigators. There will be a complete safety protocol overhaul using my mother's original standards with independent oversight." Then I looked back at Damien. "My mother's denied insurance claims will be paid retroactively to her estate. You'll establish a scholarship fund for children of employees who die without receiving proper benefits. and I will join your board as Director of Research Ethics with full voting power and authority to halt any production that doesn't meet safety standards." The silence stretched out for what felt like an eternity. "You could destroy us completely," Damien finally said. "Walk away and watch us collapse. Why help at all?" "Because 847 patients don't deserve to die for your mistakes," I said simply. "Because my mother would have wanted her work to save lives, not end them. And because I'm going to make damn sure she's never forgotten again." Damien looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Done. All of it." 6 months later, I walked through that same marble lobby. My mother's portrait hung on the wall behind the reception desk with a plaque that read, "Dr. Claudette Baptiste, lead architect of the Aurora Project." Her brilliance, dedication, and unwavering commitment to scientific integrity saved countless lives and will continue to inspire generations of researchers. Aurora was back in production, manufactured exactly according to my mother's protocols. Not a single adverse event had been reported since the reformulation. Vincent Moreau was facing criminal charges for negligent homicide and corporate fraud. Damien had personally apologized in a company-wide email and established quarterly meetings where any employee could raise safety concerns directly to the board. Every person I passed in that lobby now knew my name. Some nodded respectfully, others smiled. The same receptionist who'd looked through me 6 months ago now greeted me warmly. But the truth is, I don't do this for recognition. I do it because my mother taught me that the truth matters. That science isn't about ego or profit. It's about making the world better. She died believing she'd failed, that her legacy had been stolen and erased. She was wrong. Her legacy is every patient who survives because of Aurora, every researcher who receives the Baptiste Fellowship, every safety protocol that saves a life. The man who ordered me removed from his building learned something that day. He learned that humility isn't about where someone comes from or how they're dressed. It's about recognizing that the person you dismiss might be the only one who can save you, that the quiet woman in the simple dress might be carrying the truth you desperately need to hear. My mother always said, "The truth has a way of revealing itself, Lorraine. It might take time, but it always comes out." She was right about that too. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about karma, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. What would you have done in my position? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. You never know what they're carrying or what they're capable of when pushed too far.